The Drum Candy podcast is brought to you by Drum Factory Direct.
What is up, everyone? Welcome into episode 1 of season 2 of the Drum Candy podcast. This is your host, Mike Dawson. I'm coming to you from Drum Factory Direct in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You might notice things look a little bit differently here. I finally got my office studio set up with proper cameras and lighting. Hopefully it looks cool. And then multi-cameras. So we're going to be, this show is evolving and changing. So the new format this season is more of a variety show. I wanted to get away from long-form interviews. We're still going to have guests on every week, but I wanted to be able to bring in, just more topics, more information about gear, some lesson stuff, some product announcements. Still going to go to Hawthorne and hang out with him. So hopefully you'll dig the new format. Let us know. drumcandypodcast@gmail is our new contact info. That's where you can send listener questions, which I want anyone who has any questions about anything gear-related, drumming-related, music industry-related, shoot them over at drumcandypodcast@gmail.com. Also, if you want to be featured as the intro beat, shoot that over again, a download link of a video of yourself playing at drumcandypodcast@gmail.com. And if you also can include just a short video of you explaining what's happening in the beat, what gear you're using or what you're playing, just anything. Just kind of, I want this to be a community effort. So, get yourself featured, include your website, your social media, all that stuff. Again, so get your intro beats and your listener questions. It's going to be an integral part of the show over to drumcandypodcast@gmail.com. Now, speaking of which, the beat you just heard was submitted by Mike Malone. Mike Malone is a fantastic drummer, so make sure you're following him if you're not already on social media. He posts a lot of great videos, great looking videos, great sounds, great playing. He's also a regular participant of the Drum Club Project, which is a community initiative that I created along with Ben Hilziger of Big Fat Snare Drum. To basically what we do is we put out a backing track or a loop or something once a month. Anyone who wants to participate downloads the link, just records themselves playing to it. You can remix it, do whatever. And then once a month, we all get together on Zoom and check out what everyone did. Just share our ideas behind it, the gear we used, all the nerdy stuff. So if you're not part of that, be on the lookout. Make sure you follow Big Fat Snare Drum and Drum Factory Direct. That's where we make the announcements for that. So anyway, Mike is, he's been participating in that since we started it. This was one of his beats. So I'm going to let him explain a little bit about what was happening.
Hey, my name is Mike Malone. I'm out of Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and thanks for letting me be a part of this episode of the Drum Candy podcast. My take on this track was inspired by some of my favorite modern groove drummers, like Nate Smith and Mark Juliana. For this recording, I'm using a Gretsch Renown kit with a 12x8 inch rack tom, 16x16 inch floor tom, and a 22 inch bass drum that I recently cut down from 18 inches deep to 14 inches. The snare drum is a 14x6.5 black brass from Drum Supply House, and the cymbals are Bosphorus 15-inch groove hats, 20-inch trash crash, and a stack ring percussion 12-inch Versa stack. Thanks for listening.
All right, thanks again, Mike, for submitting that beat. And if you want to get your beat featured on the show, send it over to drumcandypodcast@gmail.com. All right, what are we going to do in this show moving forward? It's going to be a bunch of segments. So I'm going to kind of go through all my outline here for you. So every episode I want to have some news, some different announcements, some new records that might have been released, just to kind of keep us all informed on what's happening in our community. We have a main feature topic, which will be mainly about gear. We're going to spend a lot of time over probably the next couple months or so just talking about different attributes of a snare drum. I've got all the cameras set up so I can demo everything. So we got one of those here for you this week. We're going to have an interview segment every episode. This week it's the first time I've interviewed two people. Stella Mozgawa of the great band Warpaint. She has a project called Belief, an electronic project, with Brian Hollon, aka Boom Bip. So I've got both of them to talk about electronic music production. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And then I also want to include a lesson, some sort of educational thing, whether from myself or Tom Wendt will be popping in for that. Maybe some other guests will come in, and I definitely want to keep going over to Hawthorne's Drum Shop, checking out some different vintage drums and just getting some knowledge base on, how to identify different vintage things, what to look for when you're buying or selling, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to keep that happening. I'm also, like I said before, listener questions. I feel like that's an important segment that I've been missing, which I think I originally intended of having that be in the show from episode 1, but I kind of dropped the ball on that. So again, if you have any questions about anything drum related or music related or gear related, shoot them over to drumcandypodcast@gmail.com. And then I'm also going to wrap up each episode with a pick of the week from something at the Drum Factory Direct warehouse, a product or something that you might not be aware of that you might want to check out. So that's the new format. Hopefully you dig it. Hopefully I'll get more comfortable doing this speaking to the camera thing as we go along, and all this new gear. I've got camera switchers and all kinds of stuff here that's just getting used to it. So bear with me. Hope you dig it. So let's get into some news. All right, first bit of news here. There are currently 2 GoFundMe campaigns going on to help with some medical expenses for 2 really important members of the drum community. You've got Jeremy Berman at Q Drum. If you go over to Q Drum's Instagram page, you can get the link to that. He's dealing with some cancer treatment that's keeping him from working or building drums. So anything you can do to help him out, go over there and check that out. And also John at Revolution Drum, similar thing. He's going through some cancer treatment. So two great guys in the industry. If you have anything you can spare, if you want to help out or spread the word, they're both on GoFundMe. Next bit of news was a bit of surprise. I got this email August 3rd, so just a little over a week ago. Pete Lockett, the great percussionist, instrumentalist, he announces his full retirement. He is no longer performing, touring, making any records, anything, which I found really surprising. I saw him at PASIC last fall, and he performed great. But, he's moving on to another chapter in his life. So that was quite surprising news. He's going to be shutting down all of his social medias as well. Hopefully his book is still available. It is called Indian Rhythms for Drumset. I did a lot of the engraving of the music for that, or editing. I don't remember. I edited all of it. Really, really fantastic book, Indian Rhythms for Drumset. I think it's on Hudson Music. Hopefully that's still available. Good luck to you, Pete. All right, now I've got some new albums that I wanted to make you aware of if you're not aware of yet. First of all, the Mars Volta surprised me. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention, with a new single, and they've got a new album scheduled to come out with a new drummer. His name is Willie Rodriguez, and he is a Latin Grammy-winning drummer, percussionist, and band leader. He's from Puerto Rico. He went to Berklee College of Music. He got a master's degree from the New England Conservatory. He's been playing with a bunch of just huge jazz artists over the years. So it looks like now the Mars Volta have a jazz drummer in the band. So I don't know much more about it. There wasn't really any other info that I could find. Hopefully we'll get to see him play with the Mars Volta live soon. Our next up, a new album by the great New York jazz drummer Billy Drummond. It's called Valse Sinistre. That's out now. It's his first release as a leader since 1996. So if you want some just really fantastic, acoustic jazz, go check that out. That is Billy Drummond's record, Valse Sinistre. All right, moving on to the next one. Oh, Antonio Sanchez, the great drummer Antonio Sanchez. He was guest on one of the early episodes, maybe 4 or 5. His follow-up record, Bad Hombre Volume 2, is out, which features a lot of collaborations with vocalists, and he just put out a single with Kimbra called Suspended Animation. If you haven't checked out Bad Hombre Volume 2, highly recommended. It's more kind of soundtrack, experimental, electronic music with acoustic drums. Very cool. The first record, Bad Hombre Volume 1, is also fantastic. So it's definitely a slight departure from his kind of more traditional jazz playing that he's done, but it falls right in line with the work that he did with Birdman, improvising drum solos for soundtracks. So it's more in that world. Definitely go check it out. Bad Hombre Volume 2. Vibraphonist Sasha Berliner has a new record out. This is her second record. It is called Onyx. Sasha is a fantastic musician, player, composer, very creative, very forward-thinking with the instrument and her approach to the ensemble. And on drums, she's got the great Marcus Gilmore. So check out this record. This is some very fresh, modern music. Her name is Sasha Berliner. The record is called Onyx. And Marcus Gilmore's on drums. It's really a great listen. Check that one out. And then lastly, there's a duo project by trumpeter Wadada Leo Smith. It's called the Emerald Duets, and he's improvising and playing different compositions with drummers. So it's trumpet and drums. I think it's a 5-disc set. The first disc has Firon Ekelaf, who's a drummer I am not familiar with. I look forward to getting to know his playing more. The second disc has the great avant-garde drummer Andrew Cyril. Third disc has the great European drummer Han Bennick. And then the fourth and fifth disc feature the modern jazz legend Jack DeJohnette. So if you want to check out some interesting improvised music with trumpet and drums, check out Wadada Leo Smith, the Emerald Duets. All right, last bit of news. Drum Factory Direct just got a shipment of brass hoops. If you've been listening to the show early on, I was talking about how much of an improvement to your snare drum sound a set of brass hoops can be. We quickly sold out, and then supply chain issues, they were just unavailable for a long time. We just got a batch of them in. The catch is this is it. So when these are gone, for the foreseeable future, they're going to be gone. So we have sets. They're all 14 inches with 10 lugs. And you get the top and the bottom as a set. We have chrome over brass, and we have nickel over brass, and I believe there is some black nickel over brass. So make sure you go over to drumfactorydirect.com soon if you want to get a set, because again, once they're gone, they're gone. And as I said earlier in the show, that's the easiest way to make your snare drum sound very expensive with a nice set of brass hoops. Go check them out at drumfactorydirect.com. All right, now it's time to shift into our main topic. So for the next few episodes, it might end up being quite a few episodes, we're going to dig into what I'm calling everything you need to know about snare drums. And we're going to start this week with what does the diameter of a snare drum actually do? I think the easy hypothesis is it'll make the pitch higher. A 12-inch drum will be higher pitched than a 15-inch drum. But what I'm investigating, and we'll check it out in this video I made, is how does the tone change if you tune a 12, a 13, a 14, and a 15-inch drum identically, top heads and bottom heads, the exact same frequencies? What's the tone? What's the sustain? What's the feel? That's the part that doesn't translate to video, is what does it feel like when you play a 12 tuned one way versus a 15 tuned the exact same tension. What does it feel like? So my theory, which is what I wanted to test with this, was that if you like a high-pitched drum, but you don't want it to feel super stiff, then go with a very small drum and tune it a little bit lower. You'll get that pitch, but you'll get the nice soft feel. Conversely, if you like the feel of a tight drum, but you want a lower pitch, use a 15 or something like that, a 14 or a 15, because you can get a lower note, but you can get the tighter rebound if that's what you desire. So in this video, I have four different drums here. Let me just show you what we've got. So if I went a 12, a 13, a 14, and a 15. All wood shell drums. I couldn't do a perfect replica of every drum. That I don't have that available, but I did wood shell drums. 12 is this 7x12 Beech. It's a solid shell, stave shell drum by Solid Drums over in Switzerland. So that's a 12. We have a 13, which is a steam bent cherry drum that Bruce Hegwood at RBH Drums made. That's a 6x13 cherry. For the 14, I have this 6.5 steam bent flamed birch shell that GMS made. So that's our 14. And then unfortunately I don't have a solid shell 15. I have this is a ply shell mahogany that Bucks County Drums made. This is a 15. It is a 5.5 by 15. So those are our 4 sample drums. What I did was I tuned them all to my personal preference of a starting point, which is C sharp on top, F sharp on the bottom. So it's a 4th between them. I put the exact same drum heads on every drum, so they all have this. This is a Drum Factory Direct. It's a DH004. It's a single black coated. It's equivalent to a Evans G1 Remo Ambassador or a Aquarian texture coated. I believe it's a 10 mil film with a coating. So exact same head on all 4 drums. I tuned them all to the exact same frequency, top and bottom, and then I just played the same beat each time. And then I took the batter head up a third, so I went up to an E and did another playthrough. And then I squeaked out the super high note of a G on 3 drums, but not on the 15. So let's just check it out. So let's just watch the experiment, and then I'll share some more thoughts afterwards. Check it out here. So we're going to examine 4 different drums. What does the diameter of a snare drum actually do?
All right, first up, we're going to try this. This is a 7x12, the 12-inch drum. This is a solid beach drum by Solid Drums over in Switzerland. I have it tuned C sharp on top, F sharp on the bottom. All these drums are going to be starting out that way. So let's hear what the 12-inch drum sounds tuned like this, wide open, no muffling. Check it out. All right, some quick observations. At this tuning with this 12-inch drum, feels very soft, even though it's tuned to what I would consider medium or maybe even medium high on some of the other drums. It feels more like a medium low kind of vibe, real soft and cushy under the sticks. All right, now let's take it up a third. We're going to take the 12-inch drum here up a minor third to an E on top. I'm not going to touch the bottom unless I feel like I have to. Let's just see what we get when we take this up a minor third. All right, observations. Even with that little bit of adjustment, I think I might have did like a quarter turn on each lug to get it up to that. Now it sounds like a higher drum to me, like what a 12-inch drum should sound like. Even though it's not super tight, it still feels nice and soft. So that's an observation with this 12-inch drum, is you can get that high kind of popping sound without having to put a ton of tension on the drum to make it feel hard. It still feels kind of soft and comfortable. Let's see if we can squeeze another third out of it and see what happens. All right, I was able to get another third out of it, so now the batter head is G, G4, and then actually the bottom head is lower than the top now. Let's see what we get. So it's G over F sharp. I mean, it's definitely moved into special effects territory very quickly, though. So within just a couple, I mean, that might have been a total of half, 3/4 of a turn to go from what I thought was like a pretty fat, meaty lower sound to this like special effects side drum sound. So that's the 12. All right, now we've stepped up to the 13-inch drum. This is a 6x13 solid cherry shell. Again, I have it tuned just like we started with the 12. It is C sharp over F sharp, which is my starting point with every drum. Let's see how it sounds. All right, some quick observations here with the 13-inch drum at the C sharp over F. It feels tighter under the stick. It feels more kind of where I would put a drum to start. Whereas the 12 felt soft and cushy. This kind of feels more medium high, but still a lot of nice overtones. So let's crank it up a third and see what we get. All right, I took the batter head up about a half a turn it ended up being. So it's a E over F sharp. Let's see what it sounds like. All right, I think similar to the 12, once I took it up to this pitch, it started to become more of, I think of like head voice for a snare drum, where you're getting a lot more attack, losing some body. But, you know, it still feels nice and articulate. Let's take it up higher. Let's take it up to the G and see what we get. Well, that's about as high as this drum I think should ever go. It might even be too high for most situations. It's pretty choked out. It's, you know, maxed out, I would say. If you dig that sound, it might be a good special effects sound. It might be a good main sound if that's your vibe. To me, it's starting to feel a little stiff, a little rigid. I'm wanting to hear more shell, and it's not quite giving it to me at that tension. I would use the 12 for that super high sound, so I could get a little less tension on the head, still get some playability, but get that nice pop and crack. All right, that's the 13. Let's move on to the 14. All right, now it's time for the 14-inch drum. This is a 6.5 by 14 steam bent solid birch. Same place we started with the others, C sharp over F sharp. Let's see what we get. All right, some quick observations with this 14-inch drum tuned here. This feels like it has more body, more power. Feels just more like a normal starting point for a snare drum for me. It's got depth, it's got power, it's got articulation. That's why I always start at C sharp over F sharp on 14-inch drums. It's like the happy medium between tight and crispy and kind of just some fat and punchiness. Let's crank it up a bit to the E over F sharp and see what we get. Some observations with the 14 tuned up to the E. This feels like as high as this drum comfortably wants to go. It's really, that would say that's the tightest sound that this particular drum, this and probably most 14-inch drums, that feels like it's at the breaking point. But let's just try it and go a little bit further, see what happens. Let's try to take it up to the G. I'm honestly surprised how much body this 14-inch drum actually maintains at that high of a tuning, but it's certainly at the absolute max. I don't know that I could even get much higher of a pitch out of this batter head. So it's kind of, I don't know, choose your option. If you really love that super high sound, but you want some depth, some fatness out of it, maybe a 14 cranked to sky heavens. But if you want that high pitched sound, but maybe you want the drum to be a little bit more open, then maybe go for the 13 or even the 12. Let's shift over to the big guy, the 15. All right, for our biggest drum, this is a 15-inch. This is actually a plywood mahogany drum. The others were solid shells, so it's not a 100% fair comparison, but it's a 15-inch wood drum. I've got it tuned C sharp over F sharp. I can tell you already, just getting this thing initially tuned, this might be the upper register for this drum already, but let's take a listen. Yeah, so this 15-inch drum tuned this medium tuning, C sharp over F sharp, that feels kind of like the drum might be at its highest point. It feels kind of tighter, a little bit more punchy. To be honest, when I use this drum, it's almost always tuned much, much lower. But let's see what happens if we try to take it up to the E. All right, it took quite a bit of muscle to try to get this thing up to the E, but we made it. This is absolutely as high as this drum will go. It's probably well beyond the comfortable range. There's no way we would get the G out of it. But let's see what we get here with the E, the super high E. It's not necessarily where I would, choose to put this drum, but it has a lot of pop and a lot of power. And I think because the head is so tight, it's also controlled. There's not a lot of overtones, probably less ring to my ears. I have to check the recording. Less sustain and ring coming out of this drum tuned up to the E versus the 12 or the 13. Just a thought. Again, I use 15s primarily for like lower register stuff that the other drums just can't get down to. But that's it. That's the 15-inch drum. You know what? Let's take a listen to all four of them back to back. I'm just going to splice the groove at each tuning. So we're going to start with C sharp. You're going to hear all four drums. E, all four drums. And then we go to the G. You're only going to hear the 12, 13, and the 14. Check them out.
I should explain the gear that I recorded with for that demo. It's just 3 mics. It's a Shure Beta 52A bass drum mic, just outside the front head, like an inch off center. It's not inside the drum. I have a, Austrian Audio CC8 overhead, which is like 3 feet directly above the center of the snare drum, pointing straight down. And then for the snare drum mic, I opted to put it on the side of the shell. So let me hold up this drum here. You can see this. So the mic is, 2 inches away from the shell, aimed right, roughly at the middle or maybe slightly below middle of the shell. Why to do that? I did that because I didn't want to just be capturing the drum head. I wanted to capture the whole drum as best as I could with one mic. So that's the microphones for this recording. Mixing wise, just typical mixing to get rid of some low mid buildup that's just not part of the natural sound. Tiny little bit of high shelf to just add some crispiness. And then wherever I would find the fundamental pitch of the drum, just a tiny little boost. So just standard EQ moves that I would do on any recording for anyone. And then mastering, typical mastering with multi-band compression, just barely touching it, and a limiter just to bring it all up. And that's it. So you're hearing what those drums sound like in this room. There was something strange happening with the 13. It just sounded brighter. But I can tell you I didn't change the mix at all. I don't know if it was just the way that the mic was positioned on that drum. But hopefully that gave you a kind of natural representation of what these different diameter drums sound like when just same drummer plays them in the same space with the same gear. What are my observations and conclusions? I prefer smaller drums tuned lower for the feel, and bigger drums, 14s and 15s, I like when you can tune them a little bit higher. You still get a bigger note, but you get a nice response for rolls. And also because the head is tighter, it's kind of eliminating some of the overtones. Like a medium low tuned drum head will have just so many overtones, which on the 12 it was cool. I think also because the smaller drum, it just has less sound. So it can have some crazy overtones, but they kind of stay nice and tight. Whereas with the 15, if I would have done a medium low, it would just be so much sound going all over the place. Sometimes cool, but not always the best choice. So I like bigger drums tuned a little bit higher. I can still get a big, a deeper, what's the right word? I can get the depth and lower note out of it, but because it has a little bit tighter, there's just a little bit more control and more rebound, which is probably counterintuitive. I think most people probably think a 12 is meant to be cranked. A 15 is meant to be down in the guttural region, which the 15 will do that fantastic as well. And we'll talk about that in a later episode. But it was kind of the opposite. I felt like they almost wanted to balance each other out. The smaller drum wanted to be tuned lower. The bigger drum wanted to be tuned higher to find like the perfect happy medium between the two. That said, take a 12, crank it. You'll never get that sound out of a 15. Take a 15, barely put any tension on it. You'll never get that sound out of a 12. So I think it's really all about what you're looking for. But the 12 is more versatile than I expect, and same with the 15. So I think obviously everyone has to have a good 14-inch drum and maybe a 13. But for me, 14, 12, and a 15, like the 13 seemed to be the one that I would maybe leave out of the mix. I feel like the 12 and the 14 can kind of cover for me. So 12, 14, 15 would be my preferences. So anyway, that's just a quick demonstration of what the diameter of a snare drum can do for you. We'll come back next week and a different topic. I'm not sure which way we're going to go, because we could talk about shell types, metals, shell types, wood, depth of the shells. We definitely want to look at what all the different hoops do, where it's, whether it's single flange, double flange, triple flange, die cast. What do the snare wires do? I've already recorded a ton of videos comparing all the different snare wires. So there's a bunch of, we're going to take this, everything you need to know about a snare drum as far as it needs to go. So hope you dig it, and let's move on. All right, now it's time to get to the first part of my interview with Stella Mozgawa and Bryan, aka Boom Bip. They are the collaborative duo Belief. I got to see them perform as a duo at the Capitol Turnaround in Washington, D.C. a few weeks back. And it was the first time I've been to a show to see electronic music performed live. They were set up with a table. They each had a station. There was, it seemed like a lot of actual improvised interaction with mixing and layering in different programming and things. Very cool show. Stella's also the drummer of the band Warpaint, who's, again, a fantastic band, highly recommend check them out. So if either one of these projects, Warpaint or Belief, is coming near you, definitely go check them out. It's some really, really creative stuff. So this interview, it's the first time I've done a double interview, and I wanted to just dig into the process of how do you create electronic music. What are their thoughts on composing? When is a song finished? How do they do it live? All that kind of stuff. So here's part one with Stella and Bryan of Belief.
All right, so I did see you guys at the DC show, the Capitol Turnaround.
Oh, wow.
A couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
So is this the first time you guys have performed live as a duo? Like this recent tour?
No, we've been doing, this project was called Beef before it was called Belief. And we probably did maybe 5 or 6 live sets together as Beef. We didn't have songs at that time though. So we would just kind of hook up the machines and just improvise. And so these shows that the show that you caught is really the first time we've attempted to play songs. It was not an improv set. But yeah, we've been playing together for a little bit.
Yeah, and while we were doing those improvised sets earlier, we were in the process of making the album. And I think every time we tried to marry those things before the record was done, it felt like we were rushing it. And we were kind of enjoying the jam quality of doing these improvised electronic sets. And I feel like it was good training for us to then get into the studio and generate new ideas. So yeah, it was, I think the two worlds influenced each other looking back.
So how much of your live set now is still improvised versus adhering to what's on the record?
Quite a bit. I mean, I don't know. It changed every night, but what Stella's doing on the TR8 is pretty much all still improvised. I mean, you have kit sounds that you have saved.
Yeah,
so
I
we
kind
know
of
what at least.
Yeah, switching between sounds that are relevant to the songs that we play, but the builds, the effects, the dynamics of things, how hard we go, like that's all a feeling, that's all improvised.
Yeah.
We don't really, I mean, we've definitely gone through moments of being frustrated with technology or frustrated with the interplay between machines not quite working the way that we want them to, and just thinking, God, I remember, Bryan, you texted me and you're like, wouldn't it just be so much easier if we did what most people do when they do a kind of electronic set and just kind of DJ off CDJs or just play a pre-recorded thing? Not that everybody does that, but I think there's definitely a leniency with playing or DJing, pre-recorded things and live mixing them together. But I think it takes all of the fun away for us. And I think we're honoring that work that we put in the early days with improvising and kind of feeling things out. And you still, you get off stage and you can have that feeling that you do when you're playing in a band, which is like, tonight was really good. Tonight felt like we hit all the marks and we flowed really well. And the things that, if we felt a dynamic shift together without speaking, that's a really satisfying, exciting moment. It's like a bass player and changing at the same time and kind of being shocked that you both had the same idea at the same moment. That kind of stuff still happens with our setup. And so, we try and retain as much of that as we can.
Are you using Ableton Live to give you any kind of background? Like if you're improvising, the arrangement's going to evolve. So is it Live as your template?
Yeah, we use Live as the main clock. And what I have in there are mostly the bass lines from the tracks, the stems from the tracks. mainly because they're repetitive, and to just sit there and play the same thing over and over and over with, electronic music is not exciting. So it made sense to kind of can the bass lines in Ableton, but we have them kind of set up as long loops. That way there's no really set time of when the song starts or ends. And so we're just triggering loops, and then Ableton feeds MIDI out into that Roland SPX, and then from there out to the various machines.
Yeah, I managed to get this. Didn't even really think how special it was, but this great bit of kit, the Roland SPX1, I think it's called. It's kind of really hard to find now. I think they discontinued it, right, Brian? You were trying to find one.
Yeah. I was trying to pick one up. They used to be like $250, and now they're going for like $1,000 if you can find them.
Yeah.
And I don't think Roland had any intention of creating this incredible device. It seems like one of those accidental, legendary creations that just no one else makes it. So I have no idea why they stopped making something that they're the only ones that manufacture.
So
you know what I mean? There's a demand for it.
Yeah, it's like, the other option is like the Kenton Pro Solo and that kind of stuff. But
what does it do?
Yeah,
Is it a
it's
sampler?
really, no, it's a sync box. It's really utilitarian. It's basically it's got MIDI in, MIDI out, USB in, CV in, and then I think it also has, I'm not sure if it has the Korg Hertz voltage split thing that you can actually, I haven't looked into that, but it has a lot of sync opportunities, and it's part of the like, I think it was called the IRA, not the ARIA, but the IRA, like the first TR8 that came out a couple of years ago, like that weird kind of like neon greeny, really bright aesthetic. It's part of that line, and it was basically, it's just like an amazing, really solid sync box between. Oh, it has DIN sync as well, so it can sync to 606 and the 303. The original.
Which is why we use it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just like, it's extraordinarily useful. It was so cheap. I didn't even think twice about buying it. I was like, oh, this seems great. I just want a little MIDI sync box or something that I can use with my 606. And then they just kind of stopped making it. But it's really useful for us because sometimes if certain things aren't necessarily clocking on the one, when we play, there's like basically this reset button that you hold it and it will start the loop again. And it has an inbuilt shuffle as well. So you can just shuffle every single device that's plugged into it. And I just can't think of many things that have that, like, you don't have to menu dive too much. It's just everything's right there on the screen. It's like, it's a little magic box.
We kind of already led me down this, but let's do a rig rundown. What are each of you doing live? What is your instrument?
It keeps changing, but for the tour that you saw, we really, just because of travel and space, we needed to really size it down. So I was using a Korg Monologue, which I would play tones out of that into the Tascam Model 12 mixer is what we use as kind of our head. But I personally was playing the Korg Monologue, and then the Korg Monologue through MIDI was playing synths in Ableton, and then I used a push 2 to change any of the parameters of the soft synths that I was using in Ableton. And the push 2 also triggers the loops and song changes. And then I typically use a 303 Devilfish, Roland 303 Devilfish mod for the 303. And that is a great pedal of Stella's. I guess you could call it a pedal. That's the Neon Egg. What's it called?
Planetarium. Yeah, this guy in the UK makes it. They're amazing, amazing pedals. I've actually got our case here. I can show you.
Cool.
Sitting right next to me. I think this is the case.
But I run
It's hard
that.
to explain.
I run that through a. Oh yeah, there you go.
Oh, look at that. That's wild.
Isn't that cool?
So on the left, the white is the reverb, blue is the echo, and pink is the compressor. And what's really great is I run out of the Tascam 12, I run the kick drum, because we have the kick on a separate channel out of the TR8, into that compressor, and you get like sidechain compression live. So it's really pumping. So it gives it like a nice.
Yeah, and
nice
it sidechains the effects as well. So you can have the reverb sidechaining as well as the pump that you would just naturally get from sidechaining the rest of the signals. It's an amazing pedal. He definitely still makes them.
That's what I run my. Yeah, I run my soft synths through that, which gives it a better feel. So it's running out of Ableton. I'm controlling it with the push and the Korg, but as it goes through that, the planetarium, and then back into the mixer, it really just gives all the soft synths like a much bigger feel. And you can, with those effects, you can really get some really nice textures and stuff going.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you had between you? Was that set up between you so you both could mess with it? I feel like there was something you were both. That was
the Model 12, so that has built-in reverb as well. So you can adjust compression on that one, because I think all the channels have compression, like a one knob thing. Mm-hmm. And then it's got like just the aux send, so you can run different effects through it. The Neon Egg was just being run.
Cool.
Oh yeah. That thing's really great. And the great thing about that as well is that we can record all our sets without a computer. So even if we didn't have Ableton and we were just doing like a doorless setup, it records to micro SD, the whole set. And we keep joking that like in an emergency, we just press play on the last set that we did and just kind of fake it.
Well, the cool thing is that it multi-track records.
Yeah.
That's what amazed me. It's not just recording like a the master channel. Yeah, it's recording each individual channel. So when you do a playback, you've got your faders, and like worst case scenario, you've got an older set. You play with your faders and effects, and you can still put a show together, and kind of. It's a nice little safety net, but it has so many features. I'm really impressed with that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. The 12 one is like, I think, digital, but the 16 and the 24 are all completely analog. So you can do the same thing, but we just wanted like, those techno tables that they always set up for like a kind of electronic set. We just wanted everything to fit really well on that, so we don't have things like hanging off or being taped onto the table or whatever. So that one works really well. And then for these sets, just pared down to a single drum machine, which is the Roland TR8S. And you can import a lot of your own samples into it, and then it just has like the standard step sequencing stuff, but it's got a lot more variation than just like a standard 808 or 909 clone, because it's got like per pattern there's 6 variations, maybe even more. It's like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. So you can really, it's got 8. You can build each pattern incrementally, and it's got motion record and things like that. It's a really amazing, powerful drum machine. And I used to also have an MFB Tanspar, which is actually somewhere in Bryan's studio right now, and that was kind of my secondary drum machine. It's like all analog, really unique sounding drum machine, but it's half broken right now, so we decided not to on tour. I like the frame of the drum machine is sunken into the thing. So like I have to like press really hard on these tiny little buttons that are half the size of my fingertip to get like to switch between patterns and stuff. And it was almost worth it because it is such a cool sounding drum machine.
Great hi-hats.
So good. Like the clacky stuff on it is so really, really nice. But yeah, for this round, we just went with the TR8. I think for next any next shows that we do, I think we missed that extra, like, juice.
I don't think we've ever had the same gear except for this tour. Every single time we would play before, we would bring new gear into it, because we've used the 606 before. Because I have a 606 Devilfish that we've used. You know, the Tansa bar. We've used filter pedals, different guitar pedals, distortion pedals, fuzz pedals. Like, we just keep adding and playing with stuff.
Yeah, we had my MPC 1000 for a long time. That was the MIDI hub for a minute, and that was really cool. But I wouldn't mind going back to that, actually. Yeah, it's just kind of what are the sets like? What are we kind of trying to achieve? How long are the sets? How much space do we have on a table? All those things factor into what gear we end up bringing for a particular show.
Is there any rehearsal ahead of time?
We did a little bit. Yeah. We did have 2 days or something before this tour.
Yeah, 2 days, a couple hours at a time. It's more like our rehearsal's not really learning the songs. It's just kind of fine tuning the tones, and then once we get on stage, then we can, whatever happens. You know, we don't want to. There's no reason to really over rehearse it. But that was the thing when I told Stella, you know, should we just be doing what everyone else is doing and have a flash drive into a CDJ? Because, you know, when you're running all this gear through a submix on stage, you know, you don't have that mixed sound that you have on the record. Like, something like that snare might come out of the TR8 that sounds great in the studio, and then in a live venue, it's just splitting your head in half. You know, there's nothing to really tone it down, and that was happening a lot because we were, you know, there are a lot of drum sounds and whatnot within the set, so that makes me nervous. And so the rehearsals were mainly about, let's try to get the volume levels at the right space. Let's make sure, like, these tones all sound good together, and then, you know, whatever happens, you know, it's great because you know, if you've got things, if your machines are working and the clock is running, it really allows you to just have fun at that point. So you're not stressed out on trying to hit the right note or you know,
how's this kick going to sound? Yeah, how's this one instrument going to sound once I bring it in? That's always like the most stressful things. Like, here comes the drop, and I'm bringing it back in, and then it just sounds like bonkers. You know.
What are your individual roles on stage?
I would say it's pretty stage versus when we were making the records, pretty different. On stage, I stick primarily to the drum programming and the drum machines and the effects that are associated with that. And Bryan primarily deals with the melodic information and the bass. So we do that kind of conventional split live, but that was definitely not the case in the studio. I think we exchanged roles pretty like fluidly, you know. It was a fluid exchange of just kind of ideas or tracks, and it wasn't like, well, you stay in your lane and I'll stay in mine and we'll collaborate like that. It was very much like a lot more free. But I think it would be confusing if I was like, I think when you're in the improvised moment, to be worrying about what's going on with this like polysynth while you're bringing back a kick drum or changing the drum pattern or whatever, it is really nice to stay in the lane when we're performing live, and just trust each other that it's gonna sound great together, but individually we're kind of doing our job.
Do you remember
I can't do what you do on the drum machine. I can't. I'm not capable of Stella's very good at programming drums, you know.
So
and it's very humbling for me. I know, but then when I see you, I'm like, holy shit, I got a ways to go here. You know, it's just very, like, I love the way that you use the motion controls and stuff. I can like get some stuff, but it feels stiff, where you can take a drum machine and you can make it sound like a human is behind it. I don't really have that. So it's nice that that's your job.
Yeah. I mean, Brian is doing, to be fair, so much more than I am on stage when I do watch like all the things that you're dealing with. So you're like, I have to change the 303 pattern and I've got to launch the clips from Ableton. It's like there's so much going on, and I definitely couldn't do his job either, especially like programming a 303 is just like I still don't understand how it's done. I've watched a few videos like from the 303 clones and stuff, and it's still quite confusing to me. It's like
it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense.
No, it's counterintuitive instrument, but that's kind of what makes it so fascinating, because these things happen sometimes that are a little bit accidental, even if you can be in the same key, but then like this one thing that you've accidentally programmed will just be the thing that makes it so unique and special.
Do you remember the first thing you ever played together?
As this project, or just as two humans playing music?
That's a good question. How about both?
I'll say I'm trying to think the first time we ever played music. Was it in any way before Neon Neon?
Was it with no, I think it might have been Neon Neon, really. I think we did that the More project, but I don't think we were ever together on that. You were doing stuff, and then I came in and did percussion work for them.
Yeah, we did a lot of the same. We played a lot of the same shows, but I don't think we played in the same band till the Neon Neon stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was that project? Were you playing traditional drum set, Stella?
Yeah, that's Brian's project. It's a band that him and Gruff from Super Furry Animals. They have a project that. How many records did you guys make?
2
records.
Yeah, so
and then the second one
toured on the second one, the second album. She did West Coast dates with us. It was like Stella and Kate LeBon and Griff and me and Hugh. Yeah. And I guess the rehearsals are probably that's probably the first time we played together, just sitting down, which is funny to think.
It's so weird. I don't know if I think that's true, but it feels strange just because we knew each other quite well at that point and we were friends. So it wasn't like this, it didn't feel very new necessarily, but
we'd probably seen each other play so much in the same room that it just felt like we had played together.
Yeah, in bands for years.
So Brian, what was Neon Neon? You were playing guitar, singing? What was your role in that?
It changed. I mean, it's with the records, I made most of the music, and then Griff would sing and then add, guitar at times to it. But live on stage, I played, it switched. I would do either bass or like the more electronic drums. I'd play on like an SPDS with Tom. I think on that particular tour with Stella, I think I was just doing, I don't know what I was doing. What was I doing?
I guess you were playing synths.
Oh, synth. Yeah, of course. I was doing the synths. So it changed. Like the first record, I was mainly playing bass, and then second record mainly synths and drum machines and stuff. But Stella, we always had a live drummer with that project.
So when did the two of you decide to try electronic music?
That was probably 2015-ish, 16-ish. When did we set up?
In absolutely 20. I feel like it might have been 2016 because I think I was still I was in and out of recording that third Warpaint record in LA. So I feel like that was that makes sense to me. 2016, Yeah,
I think 2016. The story with that was we originally were making this record, the Beef record, with our friend Eric Wareheim, who's of Tim and Eric, like part of the comedy duo.
Mhm.
And Tim and Eric have this really great space that they just weren't using. And Eric has invited us. He's like, come set up your gear. Like, we're all summer. There's really nothing happening in here. So come on in, and that'll be easy for me to come over and like help you guys or assist in it. And so Stella and I, it was pretty funny because I think we had this idea that we were just going to knock the record out maybe in that couple month period. So we brought so much stuff in. We had
all of our
guitars
all the gear
and basses and drum kit.
Yeah.
It's just this big circle of gear, like tons of stuff.
Mhm.
And so Stella and I would go in, and that was really the first playing together with electronic stuff. And even I remember it very well. Like the first time we played, it was so much fun because we didn't have to really communicate, and we were hitting changes and stuff already, and everything was super tasteful.
Mhm.
And we recorded all of these. We recorded it fully analog. You know, we have hours of those absolutely film studio sessions.
Yeah. It was all stereo
Which are really
out
fun.
as well. Like we just summed everything. So when later on we were like, oh, wouldn't this be cool if we could take out the kick? And it was like, no, you can't do it. It is what it is.
No,
But we ended up sampling a lot of that actually. I remember when we had that record. I mean, the song didn't make it on the record, but it was on the record for a bit. The Crunch one had that like drum loop that we put through the amp and stuff like that. I'm sure there's stuff from those sessions that made it on the record as well.
Yeah, there are different sounds.
Yeah, I think prior to that, obviously, Bryan has made several records in, I guess, what you would call the electronic genre. And I was always interested in electronic music, and also had kind of done a lot of programming for my band and for other productions and stuff like that. So it didn't really feel like, oh, this is some like harebrained idea that we've had. It's cute little like, you know, hobby project with a friend. It kind of felt like we both were really hungry to do something like this and didn't really have a vehicle for it necessarily. And I'm sure, you know, Bryan has like a great output of music, but sometimes that maybe doesn't fit in with a solo project or with Boom Bip or Neon or something else. And, you know, I think we were talking always about just the songs we kind of had left over, and things started sharing music that we had made and felt like we were on the same page with our influences and things like that. And, you know, to me, that was the origin. It wasn't just like this big shift between playing in Bryan's band and just being primarily a musician, a drummer, and then switching to this like brand new territory. I feel like I'd been microdosing electronic music for like a good 10 years before that, and like collecting all these drum machines and synths, and, you know, making music pretty much just for myself. I mean, some of those instruments make it onto Warpaint records, or some of those ideas make it onto other records. But I kind of I really wanted some place to put that music, you know, and the idea of doing it with someone that I respected and whose music I really loved just felt like a no-brainer, you know.
And I think early on too, we liked the idea of a duet, because when we were sharing music, we were sharing a lot of late 80s, early 90s Warp record type bands, so like LFO or 808 State, Alltecker. Like there's that electronic duet, and that dynamic seems to work really well. And I know you and I had a love for that, and so you know, it was really fun to just be like, let's do that. Let's hook up some old machines and see what happens.
Yeah, and it kind of I'm sure Bryan deals with this a lot, and I kind of, when I was just messing around making music for myself, it gets a little bit lonely when you're making kind of cold electronic music on your own. it almost makes the experience colder and it influences the music in a way. I think it's really fun just to have somebody else that you're doing it with that feels more like a band without the stress of like multiple extreme personalities or with an opinion. It's like this really streamlined way to have a collaborative musical experience.
Definitely. I'm very familiar with the Lonely Boy records. That's all I've ever done.
Lonely Boy.
Lonely, sad boy electronic music. That's my genre right there.
So did collaborating feel like a breath of fresh air? Did you have to kind of learn how to do it? I mean, if you're not used to doing it.
It did. Well, I did it with Griff, so I had the neon thing, and then we brought in a lot of guests. But, for me, it's like a palate cleanser almost. Like every, let's say, 2 solo records, I'm just lonely. It's like I need somebody else in here to collaborate with. And so I've had those projects. I would say every couple of records I got to collaborate with somebody, and that to balance it out, that feels nice. But now I'm getting ready to go into doing a solo record, and I'm kind of looking forward to that again. But I also can't wait to record with Stella again, because I know we just have so many ideas and gear that we're excited about to kind of dig into. And so,
yeah.
All right, let's change gears a bit. We're going to jump into a quick lesson here. This is part of an ongoing series that Tom Wendt, who's been guest hosting the show here a few times over the past couple of months, he's been doing some jazz drumming essentials lessons for us. So we're going to start with lesson 1, the quarter note.
Hey folks, Thomas Wendt here for Drum Factory Direct. Thank you so much for joining us today. This series is going to deal with some of the basic fundamentals of playing the American drum set in American jazz music. Now, some people call it jazz, some people call it Black American music, some people call it Black classical music. Whatever label you want to use, it is distinctly American music. Now, whether you're a drummer who's been playing for a while and is interested in getting into this kind of music, or if you're just a young student who's just coming to the drums in general, I hope this short series will help you get into the music. Okay, so to get started with this today, we're going to begin by working on what's probably the most important part of playing this kind of music, or really any kind of music on the drums, and that is we need to begin to assimilate and internalize the general pulse and feeling of this music. Now, there's a lot of different ways that you can work on this, but one of the easiest and most effective ways that I've found is to find a really great classic recording with a great rhythm section and begin to play along with that. Now, we're going to be doing this in a really simple way. We're basically just going to be playing the quarter note pulse along with the recording. Now, I should mention that playing jazz in 2022, when you're playing the basic groove of the music, you're really going to be using the cymbal, the bass drum, and the hi-hat. Now, if you're going to be playing jazz that goes all the way back to the 1920s or even before, the timekeeping is a little bit different. That's for another video. But today, most of the time when you play this music on the drums, you're going to use the cymbal, the bass drum, and the hi-hat. What I would recommend is grab those headphones and put on a classic recording of this music. Obviously picking a tempo that's not too slow and not too fast. And as I said, we're basically going to be just playing the quarter note pulse. And what I mean by that is you're going to be playing quarter notes on the ride cymbal, quarter notes on the bass drum, but just feathering real lightly. More on that later. And the hi-hat on 2 and 4 with your foot. Something like this. Pretty simple, right? Not that big of a deal playing-wise, but the most important part of this is that, as I said before, you begin to assimilate and internalize the feeling of the music. So while you're practicing, what you need to do is you need to sort of see how the cymbal and really everything that you're doing is interacting with the other members of the band on the recording, right? Check out how the cymbal, just the quarter notes on the cymbal, are interacting with the bassist, the pianist or guitarist who might be comping, the horn players, or maybe a singer, depending on the recording. Check out how your role in the music is interacting with the other members of the band. This is how you're going to begin to sort of, as I call it, find your spot in the mix. It's really the most important part of playing this or any kind of music. In the next video installment, we'll talk about the bass drum and the hi-hat. You heard me mentioning the term feathering the bass drum, just playing very, very light quarter note pulse on the bass drum. We'll talk about that and the hi-hat in the next video. Thanks again for hanging out. See you guys soon.
So let's move on to our shop talk segment. So I'm over at Hawthorne. I filmed this a few weeks back, but I held it for this debut episode. Over at Hawthorne Drum Shop, he had a couple different Ludwig kits, and I've always been confused on how the models of 60s, 70s Ludwigs were named. So we're going to kind of dig in a little bit on what is a Hollywood kit, what is a classic kit. Let's check it out. Some vintage Ludwigs with Chris Hawthorne at Hawthorne Drum Shop.
All right, let's talk about 1970s Ludwig. So what is this particular setup that we're looking at here?
So this configuration or outfit is a Hollywood outfit. So 14 by 22, 8 by 12, 9 by 13, and 16 by 16. You could order these with other size bass drums. So, you know.
And it would still be called a Hollywood?
Yeah, they would go mainly by like the 2 up. That's usually what's determined. Oh. Now you can also get, I have a kit in the back actually that had 2 rails. So a rail here, 2
Weird.
up. I don't know what you would call that.
Weird?
Whatever I would call it would be wrong according to people on the internet. So.
But this is a 70s kit, which is the telltale is by the blue olive badge, right?
Yeah.
And
yep. Now they did have like transition era kits that were like 1969, 1970, where the badges are mixed. And it was ordered together, and it was just like they ran out of. I don't know, if I was a customer, I'd be mad.
Yeah, that's not cool.
But yeah, now they also had another configuration that was called the Big Beat that was also the same sizes, 2 up. And it was called the Big Beat because it had a different set of hardware. I think they were thicker, like Hercules stands.
That's confusing.
Yeah, I just call all these Hollywood.
So the configuration has a name. What is the series referred to as?
I just would call these classic.
Classic?
Yeah.
So what would be a super classic?
Super classic has a rail.
Oh my God. So that'd be a super classic, the one with your 2 rails?
Yeah, double rail. super classic. They also had a super beat, Mike, and that was an uncatalogued. I don't think it's in a catalog. It was a 20. Well, it was a 13, 20, and a 16 with a rail. And people just name it that because it's a combination of the big beat and the downbeat and the super classic. Excuse me. The downbeat's the 14, 12, 20.
All right, let's go through all the setups again that you know of. What would be the jazz kit? Like
Jazzette. Now, a jazzette is not a jazzette if it has a 14-inch bass drum.
What?
Yeah, I don't care. But, yeah, jazzette had a rail on top, and it was an 18-inch kick that was 12 inches deep. It had a 12 and a 14.
Okay.
But they also had many that were an 18 by 14.
Yeah.
That's not a jazzette.
What is it?
I don't know. According to the catalog, that's not a jazzette.
So what's a downbeat then?
A downbeat is a 20, 12, 14 with a rail.
Okay. Big beat.
Same as this with different hardware. It's like different stands.
Oh man.
I don't care about like this catalog stuff. It's not. I think it's stupid.
So what defines a classic? It's a 3-ply shell, usually maple, poplar maple, but if it's a wrap, maybe it's a mahogany on the outside, right? Is that right?
You will occasionally get a 70s drum that's a mahogany on the inside. They're usually really clean and they're cool to find. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, this is earlier to mid 70s. All the drums are 3-ply with clear interiors. I think like around 1975 or 76, they would start spraying it with a granitone. I don't know why they did that.
Okay. And then the white interiors would have been 60s?
But, yeah, I think around 1968 is when they stopped doing the white.
Okay.
So you'll get some 60s drums that have clear interiors, and they look pretty much like this. But they didn't, the series-wise, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody out there, but this is pretty much what they made. They had the standard series, which we've done, which are B-stock versions of these shells, but I mean, this is it. And then they came out with the rocker series, which was a 4-ply, and then the cheaper rockers, later on. But this was kind of like, you wanted a Ludwig, this is what you got.
What is the center lug series?
Oh, those are club dates.
Club dates.
And those were, I've seen 70s club dates, but mostly in the 60s.
Okay. But still same shells, right? 3-ply? All I'd say.
Well, that's kind of how they were dealing with the pricing. So like less hardware, cheaper, which is interesting because people historically have like kind of shied away from this because they view them as cheaper because they were cheaper. But it's less hardware. So think about that in terms of like actually what's attached to a shell and allowing it to ring and kind of resonate more. So
yeah, I guess the only thing that scares me with the downbeats, right, is the long lugs just getting bent. But
that's a club date.
Club dates, all
right. So you would have a bass drum and then you're like, whoop.
Yeah. But they always
sound
great.
It's a lot of lug.
So this like red finish is how rare is it these days?
It's rare. Out of like the kind of psychedelic finishes, there was Psych Red, there was Mod Orange, and there was Citrus Mod. Out of the three, this is the most common.
Oh, it is? It's also the most tiresome.
You don't like this finish?
I like it, but I think after a few weeks of using it, I'll be like, all right, where's my black drums?
Some people are like, I think it's cool. I mean, the variation in patterns is really cool. Like the bass drum on this is really blue. If you go on our website, you can see kind of the photos on it. It's really blue.
Yeah, it is.
Sometimes you'll have ones that are really green, really like this is really red. This is kind of some green in it. And these will fade really easy. Sometimes the green will like turn to white. So it's like a red, white, and blue.
Interesting.
I think looks pretty cool, but
pretty trippy.
Some people don't like that.
Well, he has a little bit on the hoop. You can see it.
So when we got this, it was pretty much as is. It didn't have any bottom heads. No front bass drum hoop. The back bass drum hoop was just like a modern replacement. So we used the original 70s Ludwig hoops, and we had some donor wrap. We cut the inlay out, glued it back in. So it fits pretty well. I mean, it's a little more faded, but that is original 70s Psych Red. And all the drums were in round too, which is nice because a lot of times when I guess I've heard it referred to as riding dirty without bottom heads.
Oh, without the bottom heads.
Yeah. They'll kind of like get out around, but they sound really good too.
Now we were talking, I think last week a little bit about spurs. Are these the thinner ones?
Those are the skinny spurs that I would love for somebody to reproduce. So if you're out there and want to reproduce Ludwig, it's literally just a curved piece of metal. I will buy 10 sets.
So when did they go to the thicker ones?
Probably later. I know like most 80s kids have thicker ones, but I've also seen Vistalites that had the thicker spurs too.
Yeah, mine does. And they don't seat very well. They don't tighten in.
It was one of those, I think, quality things for whatever reason. Sometimes you'll see, I don't know if the drums were heavier, but you have like the thicker spurs, and then wherever the wing nut goes in, it'll just kind of like get all gnarled and bent. But
these are solid.
Yeah, they're good, man. You get this set up like, I like these a little bit better than the Gallwing ones. I think that they're a little bit better for dumb people like me, who don't have to like worry. I can just stick them in and make sure.
Right. Yeah, the Gallwings don't go high enough for me because I'm a freak and I like to elevate the bass drum just a little bit off the ground.
Now, it sucks when you get one of these bass drums and I think that they made different lengths of those spurs. Like you're finishing up and the last thing you do is put the spurs in and they don't touch the ground.
That's what I have on my 68. Yep. They don't touch. Yeah. I have to like force them in a bit. Anyway, again, repeat what this is for everyone who's completely confused.
Hollywood.
Ludwig Hollywood, which means 2 up, 1 down, and a bass drum. They can be different bass drums. Simple as that.
Simple as that.
Let's move on to a different kit. All right, I'm going to take a guess. This is a super classic downbeat. No, it's just a super classic.
Super classic down. Just a super classic. Yep. 13 by or 9 by 13, 14 by 22, and 16 by 16.
It's not a super. So what makes it super is this not super, but cool
Rail console.
mount.
Yeah.
What else makes it a super?
That's it.
That's it? Just that?
Now, if you had like a diamond plate on the middle, like that one over there, it was a 9 by 13.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've had a few of those that look like they're factory. I mean, you could call it a super classic, but technically it's not because of the rail.
So
also, I just noticed there's not a simple mount on this. Usually there's a simple mount over there.
So if it was a 13, 16, 22 with a center mount, you would still call that a super classic?
No.
What would you call it?
I mean, I would, but yeah, but like, technically,
that is?
you would get yelled at.
What is it?
Drum kit. I would call it a super classic in quotations.
Okay.
So if anybody emailed me, I'd say, well, it's in quotations.
What year is this particular kit?
I don't know the exact year. probably like 74, 73.
Okay, so it's got the same thing, clear interiors.
There's a serial chart online, but I don't know if it's right or not. So unless there's like date stamps on the inside, I just say the era.
Mm-hmm. And what is this? This is, I'm used to seeing sparkles, but this is not a sparkle.
Yeah, it's red
finish.
silk.
Red silk.
I used to not like this finish for whatever reason, but it's sharp. They made a red and a blue. It's a fragile wrap, and a lot of times you'll see cracking and splitting at the seams, but these are all pretty clean. We did reglue the seams on all the drums, which is my least favorite thing to do. But no cracks in the wrap. There is some wear. Sharp looking finish, if you ask me.
So is this the same wrap, like the blue? Would that be the same thing you'd see on a standard kit? The same blue, or is it different?
No.
It's a different blue.
Standard blue. Like, they did Strata, they did Astro. They also did like a mist. So there's a mist, and this is a silk.
I don't know what the difference is.
A mist is like, the wrap's thinner. It looks a little bit different. If you put them together, you could tell the difference.
Yeah, my uncle had a blue Ludwig kit. I don't know if it was one of these or if it was...
the mist has like, they're not quite sparkles. They're like, it's almost like glitter. But not like, that's a bad example, because red glass glitter is like that one back there. Yeah. It's like actually like really small like pieces of like glitter.
Okay.
Yeah.
My memory tells me he had just a blue, like it was just a blue, like this, but blue, but like a light blue.
They did make those, and they oftentimes like green, turned like a hunter green. But they did like, it was kind of, if it was clean, it was like pretty blue. But not quite a sparkle.
Would this make it cheaper than I don't know, a Black Oyster Pearl or something?
I don't know. I think wraps were...
Just wraps?
But I don't know.
Would you price it differently?
Yeah, now I would, yeah. This isn't like a rare finish, but you usually, like in the 70s, you'll see like, champagne sparkle, silver sparkle. What are some of the other finishes? Gold sparkle. These weren't as common, but I wouldn't call them rare. So we'll probably price this like $1,500 for all three drums.
And this has the same spurs as the other ones.
Yeah.
The smaller. So nothing's different, right? Same lugs, same T-rods. The only thing different is this one piece of hardware.
That's it.
And one less drum, obviously.
One less drum.
I'm still confused. Hope you're all educated. Edumacated. I think it's all about whether you want a rail mount or not, right? And then the sizes.
Yeah, convenience. I mean, when it comes down to it, it's like what makes you feel good behind a kit. Like you can make a big deal like this. That kit is way more expensive than this because of the wrap that's on there. For some people that's worth like sitting by and be like, oh, this is like so inspiring. I love this. Some people like are inspired by a rail and they like it and they like having it there. Other people don't care. So it's whatever you personally care about and makes you feel good.
There you have it. For me, it'd be all about the sound, so I'd probably go for this one, just because it's going to be the same shells, but a little bit cheaper. That'd be my choice. And
well, you have bad taste, Mike.
I have terrible taste, and I never used two rack toms, ever. Not since high school, so.
You never used two rack toms? I've tried.
Puts the ride in a weird spot.
What do you do with the other one?
Yeah. Do I really need that third tom sound? I went boom and boom, and I'm not good.
Oh, and then you try to use it. You're like, oh, I'm going to use it, and then all your fills finish on the other top.
Anyway, Ludwig Super versus Hollywood.
Good job. Super classic Hollywood.
All right. Peace.
Perfect.
All right, it's time to get into some listener questions. If you have any questions at all about drums or drumming or the music industry in general, shoot them over to drumcandypodcast@gmail.com. I will be, this first batch I'll be answering myself, but I'm hoping to eventually start sending these out to previous guests to get their input as well. We'll see how that goes. But our first question here is from Mike Lomax. Mike says, I recently played a few gigs after having not played for over 4 years. From that, I discovered that hauling big, heavy drums and double brace hardware is a young man's game, no doubt. My question is, what's the best sounding but lightest shell material for smaller sized drums? And what's the lightest, most stable hardware, including a hi-hat stand that we can use with a double pedal? All right, let's start with the best sounding but lightest shell material for smaller sized drums. It's kind of hard to answer that specifically, but I mean, poplar and mahogany are going to be light. You know, a thinner shell, a plywood shell is going to be lighter. But really, I think what adds the weight is going to be the hardware. So I wouldn't go with die-cast hoops. I would go with lighter hardware, maybe some 1.6 triple flange hoops, and maybe not big solid brass lugs. Some of the die-cast stuff might be a little bit lighter. So you have to kind of look at, and what's the tom mount situation on those drums, and to look at more what's being put on the drum that could make it super heavy. I think as long as you're playing a thin plywood shell drum, like a solid shell drum is going to be heavier than a plywood shell. You know, the shell itself is going to be pretty light. It's just all the other stuff that gets stuck onto it. So just look for the minimal hardware, maybe aluminum hardware, small single point lugs, something like that. Definitely don't get die-cast hoops. And then the second part of your question, what's the lightest but most stable hardware? The Yamaha Crosstown, I think that's a game changer. It's aluminum. I've seen a lot of the drummers here in Pittsburgh use it. I mean, that's kind of like the game changer. It's normal size stands, but it's made of lightweight aluminum, so it's super, super light. I use the Tama Classic stands, but those are very thin, very lightweight, not something, I mean, if you're playing double bass, that means you're probably hitting a little bit harder than I do. I don't know that those will be the right choice. So I would check out the Yamaha Crosstown. All right, the next question is from Jeff Costello. It is the effect of depth on a snare drum sound. I hate to tease this, but we're going to be covering this as a main topic in a future episode. So we will do some testing to see what does the depth of the snare drum do to the sound. I'll give you just a quick spoiler. If you think of speed of response, shallower is going to be faster, deeper is going to be slower. Volume ceiling, a shallow drum is going to choke out faster than a super deep drum for, the harder you hit. But we're going to go into that in a deep dive in an upcoming episode, so stay tuned. All right, this one, unfortunately, I forgot to write down who this came in from. It was a response to an Instagram story of Ask Me a Question. What is the easiest way to identify treble frequencies / standing waves in a room? I asked my friend Mark Williams, who owns a studio in DC, what he would recommend, because he's having his room tuned now. And I'd forgotten that there's a lot of advanced software for that. So if you really, really want to get your room tuned, there's software and like a special microphone. If you just search for, room tuning software, there's one. Dirac Live is one I just got up here. There's different options for that. If you want to go like more professional, like room correction, what it does, it'll balance your speakers out so that they're, you're compensating for what the room might be doing. Now, if you want to just see, what in your room kind of resonates louder than the rest, there's plenty of speaker test videos out there. So what I just found one, if you go to YouTube, it's just called Test Your Speakers, ! by Dr. Mix. So you just play that through your studio speakers. It just sends a sine wave through the entire spectrum at the exact same amplitude, which means same volume. But as it hits certain frequencies that maybe your room resonates more, it's going to get a lot louder. And then it's going to disappear on some frequencies that maybe aren't as prominent. So that's a good way to kind of see ballpark what pockets of frequencies might resonate more in your room. So I'd recommend that. It's not a pleasant thing to have to listen to, but it is effective. That way you can just be aware of what drums might resonate more if they're in that frequency range. The big thing for me is finding where does the bass drum sound big and full in the space that I'm in, and then I can kind of deal with the rest. Most of the time I found the rack tom resonates in a smaller room, and the floor tom tends to get lost. So I have to always compensate for that. Hit the rack tom quieter, floor tom louder, lower the rack tom physically, so it's more kind of parallel with the snare and floor if it's really resonating. But check out the test your speakers. That's probably the good place to start without having to invest in any kind of crazy software. I've got 2 questions here from Glenn Stella. I'm going to answer one of them. We'll save one for next week. So the first one is, if you didn't opt for Ludwig, what hardware manufacturer, drum set, and snare would you play live or recording with? What? I'm not sure I know. It says what HW manufacturer drum set. If you didn't opt for Ludwig, I wouldn't necessarily play vintage drums live. I don't like to use them live. They tend to be too muddy and dull sounding. I think that's why they work better in the studio, because they're more controlled and darker sounding, so you can dig into them more, not having the drum overwhelm the space or the microphone. Live, I use Bucks County drums almost exclusively, or else it's just backline stuff, whatever's available. I've been using an oak kit that is really fantastic for live because the overtones are really tight and controlled, so microphones just love them. What else have I been taking out? That's been my live kit. And snare drum, I always take at least 2 drums with me, one metal, one wood, just so I can have options for different spaces depending on the project. I tend to go with the same depth, but one might be maple, one might be aluminum. If it's a more of a dynamic show where I got to play quieter, it might be a 5 or 5.5. If it's something where I'm going to be hitting, it'll be 2 6.5s. But I always take a wood and a metal and then assess what the room is giving me. Yeah, so that's it. For live, I would use modern drums live, not vintage drums, in my personal opinion. They'll hold up better, they project better, they're easier to deal with, they're less temperamental. I use Bucks County drums. All right, so that's it for listener questions. Thank you again. If you have any questions you want to have answered in the show, shoot them over to drumcandypodcast@gmail.com. All right, we are at the end of the show. I just have one more thing to mention here, but I appreciate you all sticking with this pilot episode for season 2. I have not done the talking directly into the camera thing for an hour. I need a drink of water. But the last chunk here, we're calling this Warehouse Pick of the Week. This was a few months ago. I put together this kind of pre-head and wire pack. We were calling it the Evans Classic Snare Tune-Up Kit. And it came with, I got the drum right here. It's an Evans Strata 1000 batter head, which is typically a concert snare drum head, but it really looks and sounds like a calfskin head. It's thin. It's a thinner head with a lighter kind of coating on it. And then the bottom side is Orchestral 200, which is a really thin bottom side head. Again, it's the extra hazy film. And then the Concert 16 snare wires. So 16 strands, slightly looser spiral wires. Those are the pure sounds. So I think we put together a handful of those. Again, they're back on drumfactorydirect.com. This is one of my favorite combinations. I have this old vintage Slingerland 3-ply drum that, I liked it, but it just wasn't really giving me what I wanted it to give me, which was that real old school, raspy, dark, dry kind of sound. And then once I put these heads on it, Strata 1000, Orchestral 200, and then the darker sounding, less rattly Concert 16 snare wires, it sounds like an old bebop record to me. So I've got a demo here. We'll check that out now. So that's the Evans Classic Snare Tune-Up Kit. You can get that all prepackaged over at drumfactorydirect.com. That is it for this week's episode. Thank you all for listening. And again, I've said it 100 times, but email me, stay in contact, drumcandypodcast@gmail.com. Send in your intro beats, send in your listener questions. Any and all feedback is highly appreciated. And we're going to let Mike Malone send us out. So see you next week.